We're now 5 weeks into the season in the SEC, and if someone had not seen any of this at all, they'd probably come back and say, "Huh, it looks like Georgia and Alabama again, huh?" It's not been quite the easiest path to get there, but that's where we stand here in the middle of October. I'm Dayne Young, joined by Brent Rollins from Pro Football Focus and the Hall of Fame head coach Jim Donnan. We do Around the League here from sports.com, where we talk about every game in the SEC. We're brought to you by Connor Grading and Landscaping and Breda Pest Management. Coach, I'm going to start with you with our game of the week, which is Texas A&M at number 19, Tennessee. The Vols a 3.5-point favorite at home. I thought the over-under interesting in this game, 54.5. The prognosticator is not saying a lot of points in this game.
Hard to pick those over-under anymore unless you're playing Middle Tennessee last night. The over-under was 54, and they hit it right on the number. But I think the biggest thing in this game, defensively, both teams have been really good in certain situations, particularly against the run. You've got a team that really stops the run, and Texas A&M and certainly Tennessee has pressured the quarterback and done a lot of things to create lost yardage plays. I think the quarterback that can launch the ball, and it's pretty obvious from what happened with Alabama last week, you got to make some big plays in the passing game against this A&M defense. And can Milton do that? You know, they've been relying so much on the running game, and they haven't had a lot of explosive plays. So this is a time for both teams that really, I mean, you know, it's an elimination game. You're pretty much out of the deal anyway with one loss, but certainly the fact that A&M lost directly to Alabama, they'll have to Alabama lose twice. But I look for this to be a very competitive game. Both quarterbacks are good, and whichever one takes best care of the ball, I think wins this game. How about you, Brent?
Very similar. And then also who protects their quarterback, because Max Johnson last week was pressured on 59% of his dropbacks. That's insane for a game. That's not sustainable. Now, I will say some of that was Max holding onto the ball. I think he did a lot of, instead of getting rid of the ball sometimes. But I don't know what in the world was Jimbo thinking not going for some of those fourth downs. Like, you go for it on the first drive. You drive all the way down the field and go for it, and then you don't get anything. And then later in the game, you're tied, and then you're in, and then down 7 in Alabama territory, that part. And then, all right, goal to go, you're a score away, and then you're 9, I think they were 9 down. They get 2nd and 12, and they say, okay, we're going to run a couple more plays. They waste like another 50 seconds to a minute and then kick the field goal. I would have kicked it once with the penalty.
Timeout too.
I mean, just so much of the, hey, you're the CEO, everything should be sort of by the book. There's like a model thing that you can put into the a simulation and be like, hey, here's the game scenario, here's the down distance, time, all the factors that go into play, what's the score, all that. Should you go for it or should you punt? And like getting the fourth downs in those situations was like a 15 to 20% win probability change for Texas A&M, like massive in terms of win probability numbers. But it's just, I was very frustrated because outside of big plays, they really dominated the game. And I think should have beat Alabama, but they just couldn't get over the hump. But can they protect Max Johnson? And like Coach said, can Milton actually make plays down the field? Because Tennessee, you about to go this physical game because Texas A&M's physical, at Alabama, at Kentucky. Nice little 3-week stretch for them.
And so far on the schedule for Tennessee, I really don't know who the Vols are, because we've talked about Georgia's schedule. We talked about Kentucky has an easy schedule. I mean, Tennessee's played Virginia, Austin Peay, and UTSA. Other than that, they lost badly to Florida, and they did beat South Carolina pretty good. So I don't know what to think about this team because I don't think we've seen a lot.
Definitely going to learn a lot this week.
All right, next game on our slate, Brent, I'll stay with you on this one. I think this is the most interesting game of the week in the SEC. It's Auburn at LSU. LSU an 11-point favorite at home. If this was in Auburn, I think this could get a little dicey, but it isn't. It's Tiger Stadium at night, and Auburn's offense, Georgia notwithstanding, still has some issues.
Yeah, but guess who? They get to play LSU's defense, which there for a time during the game against Missouri, I was like, okay, is Missouri going to even have to punt in this game? And they actually did finally get a few stops here and there in the second half because Jaden Daniels is obviously playing on a whole other level. I think he's 4th right now in the Power 5 in terms of overall grades for quarterbacks. So, like, he's playing on that whole other level. Can you actually get some stops if you're LSU? Outside of that, for Auburn, can you complete some passes, or is it going to be all QB run game dependent?
Yeah, I just think this is going to be a tough out for Auburn because they can't keep up with it from the scoring perspective. Even if they have a out of body experience, they just haven't shown. They've had 6 straight games under 100 yards passing going back to last year. And the one thing that LSU can do is make some plays in the open field once in a while, and I think they'll do that against Auburn's offense. And then, of course, Daniels will present a heck of a problem for they just can't gear in on stopping the run. He's so good at running when he's under duress and making the plays, and they got big-time receivers. I would be surprised if LSU doesn't really kind of show their stuff and win this game handily.
What's interesting about Daniels and his running ability, like you watch him and it's like, is he moving that fast? Because he's just kind of like Vic, not necessarily Vic-esque, but Randy Moss-esque in a way with his length. And it's like, is he really moving that fast? But he's just blowing by people, gets through creases, sneaks. Like he's not crazy shifty, but he gets through creases like crazy. His ability to run and find holes is amazing.
Prognosticating ahead, I think you can say LSU controls its own destiny because Ole Miss plays Georgia at Georgia, and that's not going to be favorable for the Rebels. But LSU still having at Alabama, A&M at the end of the season. Coach, I think Brian Kelly probably is frustrated at the schedule with one thing. In between Auburn and then in between at Alabama, there's a bye week too. But you get Army. Why? Why would you want to play that offense in the middle of your SEC schedule?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have anything to do with that. I mean, it's probably scheduled a few years ago. But the thing that Army's doing, though, has gotten away from their pure bone stuff. They're running more. I watched them against Louisiana Monroe. They're actually running some gun stuff, a lot like Air Force, still triple option. But they've gotten away. They made a change offensive coordinator-wise. But, again, that's not a real good team to be playing to. Oklahoma can show you that. When a couple years ago they ended up playing them, and it was a terrible nightmare for them. But I think LSU is just a wannabe team. They want to be like they were last year. They're not as good defensively for sure, and offensively they make enough mistakes that against a good team it really haunts them. So Ole Miss, we'll be talking about them. Certainly got a lot of good things going for them, but I just don't see who's going to. We've already seen Ole Miss lose to Alabama. I don't see Alabama's got 4 of the last 6 at home. It's going to be hard to unseat them.
Ole Miss gets the week off. If you want the week off from your yard work, you need to check out Connor Grading and Landscaping, ConnorGrading.com. I want to show you this before and after that they did for this yard that kind of backs up to a lake with a little pier. And man, like just the difference that happens in a couple of days when Connor Grading and Landscaping gets out there, moves the earth, lays down the sod, make sure everything gets routed like it needs to be. So if a rainstorm comes in, that's not going to completely wreck all the progress you've made. These are really intelligent people when it comes to how the earth operates and how weather affects it and how it's going to sustain. So you don't have to do this again in 6 months. ConnorGrading.com. They've been longtime supporters of UGAsports.com and especially around the league. So tell Mike Connor and his team that you heard about them from around the league at UGAsports.com. All right, Coach, Florida and South Carolina, that's a 3:30 kick on the SEC network. South Carolina's 2-3, 1-2 in the league right now, but a 2-point favorite at home against the Gators.
Well, you just look at the home standing team. That's been the real big deal for Shane Beamer's team. They've utilized that home field advantage. And you talk about a woeful away from home team. That's the Florida Gators, particularly under Billy Napier. He's only won one time when they left the swamp since he's been there. And they've lost as a team 15 out of the last 17 from when they've left there. That includes the losses to Georgia at supposedly neutral field there in Jacksonville. So, I mean, I see some semblance of some athletes on this Florida team, and I see occasionally they'll look like a team, but stop the penalties, stop the lost yardage plays. You're not good enough to beat anybody if you beat yourself. You look at all these losses; they have an inordinate amount of just dumbass penalties on top of just the regular penalties. But they do have some capable players. And Etienne didn't play last week. I hope he does this week for Mertz's sake, so they get a better running game. And as far as South Carolina, this is a team that's on the edge, the precipice. I mean, this could be a team that if you don't get this W at home, you still got to go to Missouri. You got to go to A&M. You got Clemson coming in there. You're looking at that new contract that Shane Beamer signed. All of a sudden, they're not even going to be in a bowl. They got to get 4 more W's. I don't know where they're going to come from, but they do have a quarterback that can play out of his mind, and they seem to be getting a little bit better at protecting and running. This is a real – like I couldn't pick this game if you gave me $1 million bonus to pick it, because you're talking about – it looks like playing at home, South Carolina should win against the Gators, but last year Gators destroyed them down there at the Swamp. So how you feel about it, Brent? Give me some updates here. Give me some help, man. I need it.
I mean, I feel like it's like you said, it's a kitchen sink game. Like this is where Beamer goes for it. Fake punt, things like that, trying to get the crowd, keeping the crowd into the game, because, like you said, I think there's 2 games left on their schedule that they'll be favored. That's it. And 4-8, staring at their face if they don't handle some, get some wins where they're not necessarily favored or potentially get an upset here or there. The biggest thing with Florida, like you said, Coach, offensively, it's like, and I looked at this later in the week, looking at Georgia and Kentucky, watching Florida offensively versus Kentucky. The answers that they provide for the quarterback are so minimal. And it was very frustrating to watch, to be like, okay, this should be an easy, hey, let's have an answer to the blitz. Let's have a hot to the blitz here. No answer. And that inconsistency, like Mertz is playing actually really well within what it is they're asking him to do. But he is last in the Power 5 in terms of average depth of target by a wide margin. 5.6 yards is how far on average he throws the football down the field. Carson Beck is down there as well. His is still 8.1. It's dink and dunk and short and quick, balls out quick, no playmakers in terms of making plays down the field. If they don't get that with the road woes they've said, I think you talked about, Coach, it's going to be a struggle, I think, for them.
And with South Carolina may not have a path to a bowl game, Coach, I look at Florida's schedule, and if Florida doesn't beat South Carolina, it needs 2 more wins out of the following. Georgia, Arkansas at home, okay, I can see it. At LSU, at Missouri, Florida State at the end,
Well, the one thing they got over South Carolina, they got 4, and South Carolina's got 2. So that's it's a little easier to get 2. But you're right. I mean, and you got to go get a winning season. I mean, they've already had 2 losing seasons in a row. One of them, Napier wasn't a coach, but I don't know that they want to go to a bowl if they play like they did out there in Las Vegas last year. I mean, they kicked a field goal to keep from getting shut out at the end of the game against Oregon State. And, I just don't want to pile it on Florida too bad, because they do have some capable players, and they've got great tradition, but it just doesn't strike fear in you to see that Gator team come out on the field right now. I mean, but deep down, they got to win over Tennessee, so you can't take that away from them.
Staying in the SEC East, Brent, I do a weekly radio hit in Clemson, and they asked me this morning, who's the second best team in the SEC East? And I stammered, and I stumbled, and I landed on Missouri. And you can tell me if that's right or wrong, but Missouri is an underdog at Kentucky, 2 5-1 teams. Kentucky a 2.5-point favorite at home.
Can I tell you after this game? Am I allowed to postpone that answer to see after this game? This is like, all right. Kentucky, I don't know, Coach. Have you ever had a game where one player literally sabotages your team? Like what 62 for Kentucky did. Like the penalties that he had were just egregiously bad, where they're rolling down the field. And then also just a couple even missed blocks at certain points. But like because of those 2 things plus 0 for Kentucky, the Walker kid, those penalties, like it's instantaneously down 21-0, and it's their own doing as much as anything. But with Missouri, I thought they were just going to steamroll and keep steamrolling LSU because Brady Cook and then Luther Burden, that combo, some of the throws that Cook made, like the one he made, the Weiss in the left corner of the end zone, phenomenal throw. And he's running the ball a little bit. I think I like Missouri on the road here.
Yeah, when you look at the Missouri football team, they had everything going for them. The biggest crowd ever, going back to back when they were rolling and winning the SEC East when they first got in there. I mean, they had a good lead, but they squandered it because, everybody's talking about going into the season. If they can score the points, their defense is going to carry them. Now, all of a sudden, their defense looks like sometimes they hadn't even practiced some of the ways they've just given up so many inordinate amount of big plays. But getting back to Kentucky, we talked about it last week, and I said, I don't think Georgia is as bad as some people think they are. They were trying to stick a fork in us, and I certainly didn't think Kentucky was as good based on the victory over Florida. That was what everybody's basing on. They struggled against Eastern Kentucky. I think you talked about how many yards Vanderbilt held Davis to. They just don't win any big games. When you look back at his career, 11 years, he's only beaten 2 teams with a winning record in the SEC games since he's been the coach there. I'm talking about if you take an Eastern Division team or a team that won 6 and lost 2 or 5 and won 3, 5 and lost 3, they've only done that twice. So he can't win any big games. I don't know what it is. He's a good coach. They certainly prepare well. But let me just tell you, Mike Bobo's got the answer against him. He's hung 50 on this team 3 different times under 2 different head coaches. He hit it twice when he was the coach against Mark Richt, and he did it Saturday. So, and it probably could have been a lot worse if that had kept him in there. But I just think Georgia right now, different level when they play up to their potential. But, and they got their injuries situation coming back too that's going to help them. But the reality is, again, I don't think Georgia now is as good as they look, and Kentucky as bad as they look. So they're playing at home, and you got to call on all the stars there to get out there and help them win, because this is always a down-to-the-wire game. We look at some of the calls at the end of the game, the way it's influenced the way this game has turned out has been a real nail-biter every time they play.
2 things down the pike for Kentucky. 1, Alabama's still on the schedule later in the season, so that's not good. 2, Louisville, the in-state rival that you play at the end of the season. Currently undefeated Louisville after beating Notre Dame. Here's what's left for Louisville. At Pitt, that's winnable. Duke at home, winnable. Virginia Tech, that's going to be a win. Virginia, that's going to be a win. At Miami, I have no idea. Let's see if they kneel the ball. There is a chance, y'all, that Louisville can go undefeated leading into Kentucky, and that's what Mark Stoops has to deal with on that day.
Where's the game?
That game is at home in Louisville.
All right, well, that's going to be tough. He's still got to play Bama too, right?
Yep, Kentucky has that. But I'm just saying, from a logistical standpoint of talking to your fan base, trying to get more money out of it, if you're a rival in the state at the end of the season just went undefeated.
And just hired a new coach.
Yes. Like that. And now the schedule's not great for Louisville. I'm not sitting here saying they're a great team or anything. I'm just saying it wouldn't be the greatest look for old Mark Stoops.
No.
Well, I can tell you this: Kentucky, some of those guys, all they got to do is go behind some of those barns and dig up some of that cash. They got some money they can hand out. That's for sure.
I mean, just go ask the basketball team for a loaner.
You can find that bourbon cash. I hear you, Coach. Well, if you're digging in your yard trying to figure out where all those critters and pests are coming from, don't do that. Call Breda Pest, and they'll come do it for you. Family-owned business, the official pest control company of the Georgia Bulldogs, so they can service Sanford Stadium. They can service your home too. BredaPest.com. Man, I really love seeing just the customer service that they give, but also this is a family-owned business. Been going on for 5 decades now, and that's Breda Pest is a proud sponsor of what we do here, and we're proud to have them aboard this season. Again, the official pest control company of the Georgia Bulldogs. 2 more games here in the SEC. Coach, I'm going to go right back to you on this. Arkansas 0-3 in the league so far. not getting any reprieve with Alabama. Crimson Tide, 20-point favorite at home. Sam Pittman needs a little good news somewhere. Otherwise, this can turn south pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm really surprised. I mean, certainly they they've played a difficult schedule, including BYU is a good team. But to be down like this right now, they're against the wall and just haven't had any semblance of a running game. And KJ Jefferson is pressing to get some help. Defense gives up so many big plays. They played good the other day. I mean, they were competitive, that's for sure, against Ole Miss and held Ole Miss fairly well. But I just think this is going to be a tall task because all of a sudden that Bama team that everybody was doubting and wanted to know if Nick still had it and can Milroe play and all that, they found a way to generate some offense and still have some trouble with discipline, though. 14 penalties. I mean, that's unbelievable. Last year they lost 2 games where they had 15 penalties and another 17. They got to stop those, but their defense is starting to look like some of those Alabama defenses we used to see when Kirby Smart was there. So I just think unless Alabama just really doesn't do anything offensively, that this is going to be tough road for Arkansas. Don't you, Brent?
Yes, and especially the only caveat I would make to that is if you can keep them from getting big plays down the field, because what Milroe is doing right now with a deep ball is unreal. He is on throws over 20 yards in the air. He is 17 of 25 for 602 yards, 7 touchdowns, no picks, 99.1 passing grade on throws over 20 yards. That's insanity. Like that's amazing. And by the way, that's 52% of his yards. Like for comparison, Beck has like almost 1,900 yards. 20% of his yards are on throws over 20 yards. So like the amount of just how they are depending on the big play plus the running part, if you stop the big play in the passing game, I don't know that he's consistent enough in the underneath areas to do that. But like you talk about, they're competitive with Arkansas. Another game where they lose by 1 score or less. Another game where they're 2 straight tied or leading in the fourth quarter and can't finish the deal. It's just, I think that's going to be sort of the story of the Sam Pittman area at Arkansas is highly competitive, just couldn't finish the deal.
Which is still better than the Chad Morris era, no matter what happens.
And one other thing with Bama, and I think you talked about the defense for Bama. Caleb Downs, the true freshman from Mill Creek outside of Atlanta, struggled early. Texas and Sark took advantage of him in that game. He's been on a massive heater the last 3 games, 85-plus grade each of the last 3 games, is now the 8th highest graded safety in the nation as a true freshman. When you combine that with Arnold and Kool-Aid at the corners, strength of the secondary, now you let Dallas Turner and Braswell and those guys eat. Like that's the recipe for them. Hit a big play out down the field. Burton, by the way, Jermaine Burton stepping up for them. Run the football a little bit, run the QB, and then play defense.
Ain't it funny how talent wins out? Final game of the week here in the SEC. Georgia's at Vanderbilt. That's a noon Eastern kick on CBS. Georgia, 31.5-point favorite. Brent, Vandy had the same stretch last year where it looked like all was lost, but found a way end of the season, beat Kentucky, beat Florida, lost 56-0 to Tennessee, fine, whatever. But it was still 2 wins to build momentum for a program that didn't have a whole lot of hope. I'm not seeing that this year.
No, and it's mainly because their quarterbacks keep turning the ball over. Their QBs lead the league in interceptions and also turnover-worthy plays. So the quarterbacks take care of the ball, give them a chance. The big thing, though, with this is every team they've played has pressured them outside of the FCS team that they played. I want to see Georgia get consistent, just rush with 4 and get pressure, because that's not something we've seen a lot from Georgia. Because they actually, like, Shepard is an NFL-level receiver and maybe one of the better receivers that Georgia's going to face in their schedule all season. 6'3", 200-pound guy. I think he leads the number 2 in the FBS in terms of touchdown receptions already. So they're going to feature him, and they're going to throw him a lot and get the corners and probably pick on Daylen Everett a good bit, I would bet. But can you pressure them because everybody else has? And then, hey, can you play against some of the receivers? Outside of that, 1, noon kick, in Nashville. That's always a thing. Like that's, don't sleepwalk through the game. Do like you did 2 years ago, which, by the way, do you remember who the starting quarterback was in that game 2 years ago?
JT Daniels.
That would be JT Daniels started that game 2 years ago at Vanderbilt.
Last start, really.
Mm-hmm. And outside that, and then also the biggest thing about, and Dane, we talked about this in Film Don't Lie, but Georgia dictated the pace of the game against Kentucky with their offense. And I think that's how they have to play and how they should play, is because that's playing to the strength of their defense. The strength of the defense is the secondary. You force teams into throwing the ball, you're playing to the strength of your defense. The strength of your offense is throwing the ball. Do it. And they've done such a great job of being efficient with it, because I was asked earlier in the week, hey, is that, you think that's bothering Kirby, that Kirby Smart, that his team is such a pass-centric team? No, because he knows that's the best way to win. But also, too, as long as they're playing complementary football and it's not inefficient and you got consistent 3-and-outs, he's like, all right, let's go for it. Because he talks consistently about how much explosive play difference matters, and that's where they're getting their explosive plays, and that's where they're going to, is in the passing game.
I can see Georgia, though, because of the people we're getting back. If Milton continues to play like he is, I think our running game is going to be accelerated and not take away from the passing game, but not put all the burden on the hitting all those plays and making first downs all the time on 3rd and 5 and all that. I mean, I like the analysis there, but I do feel like, particularly with Milton coming in there to help Edwards, that we can take a little burden off of the quarterback. And what happens there, you might not throw as much, but you hit them with a big one with the play action that comes off the running. So I look for Georgia to hammer and tong them a little bit up there Saturday.
And with the teams that are upcoming on the schedule, at least a couple of them, if you get a big lead on a Florida later, definitely Vandy this week, I think there's some cash carries in there for the second half.
Yeah, you got cash, and maybe Rod Robinson is going to start playing again. And then we didn't get to see much of Bell at running back, but he's still going to be a part of it. We got so many different avenues to travel. It's hard to get them all. It's like Roddy going through the buffet, going for the key lime pie right away. But you got to be careful.
The timing of the schedule, by the way, with Georgia, that like getting through this part of their schedule, showing what they did against Kentucky, playing Vanderbilt, having the week off before the stretch run of games that they have, that sort of perfect timing from a schedule standpoint.
3 quick games I want to touch outside of the SEC. Coach, your buddy Mac Brown being the home favorite against Miami. This was going to be a massive matchup if Miami kneels the ball out. It's still a big-time one in the ACC as North Carolina tries to maintain its status as one of those top 2 spots, because, like I said, with Louisville doing what it's doing, North Carolina doing what it's doing, all of a sudden Florida State up there too. Top end of the ACC is pretty crowded.
Yeah, I think Drake Mays really gives you a chance against anybody, and they got this Tez guy back that he got eligible for a transfer from Kent State. That's helping them. But defensively, they're just playing so much better, creating low yardage plays and not having just outscore everybody, creating some turnovers. Playing at home's massive for Carolina, because they're going against a team that's kind of have a little bit of doubt there. But certainly you've got a situation there, kind of like the Big Ten. You got 3 undefeated teams there in Louisville and Carolina and Florida State, and you just like Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. Some of these teams are going to knock each other out.
One big difference: those 3 that we just talked about in the ACC, they don't play each other. Like, they legit don't play each other in the regular season. So, like, they could all end up being undefeated. But, Coach, I got to ask you about this because of what happened. How do you stand up in front of your team after what happened to Miami?
You just got to stand up and say, look, I didn't do what I needed to. I mean, you can't fake it. I mean, it was just a mistake. But it needs to be in everybody's contract. If it was 1:30 to go and they got one timeout, what are you going to do? And if you don't say kneel, you're not going to get the contract.
Clause. Put it in as a clause. That's great. I like that.
Brent, some people may be surprised at the line of USC and Notre Dame. Notre Dame now with 2 losses on the season to Ohio State and Louisville, but the Fighting Irish a 3-point favorite at home against undefeated USC.
That's not much belief in USC's defense, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've struggled against Arizona, who Mississippi State beats. Like, it's you got to play both sides of the ball, and it's one of those ones where that coach, he has consistently not necessarily ignored the other side of the ball, but it's not necessarily something that's ever been a part of his a part of his teams and his team's makeup and DNA. So I don't know. I did see some interesting things where they were practicing. They had like water hoses.
Yeah, we do that.
With the guys with the thing. I thought that was
on,
interesting. That was good for the punt returns guys. Things like that.
But here's the thing: they got Caleb Williams, and this guy knows how to do it. Even though Hartman's okay, you still got a team that's very capable of scoring a lot of points. But it could go either way. And then I guess the last game we're going to be talking about is Oregon, and certainly two of the best teams in the country as far as putting up points. I just think Washington's got a little bit more firepower to help their quarterback than maybe Bo Nix does. I mean, I just think you're not going to beat Washington by yourself, scrambling and making plays. And defensively, Washington had to answer for them last year. So we'll see how it goes. But we're pulling hard for Dan Lanning, that's for sure.
Washington's a 3-point favorite in that game. That's a 3:30 kick on ABC. So after Georgia Vandy, if you're watching that, you'll be able to flip over and catch the game of the week around the country.
We got one more question, Coach.
All right.
Was the Venmo money well spent for the family of Donnans?
Oh yeah, we enjoyed. I went through and I talked to Dayne because we did watch along. I was really kind of not my normal self at the end of that game. I mean, I didn't think we had a chance. Then we had a chance, but everybody was happy, and it was just. It's just like for our fans around here in Georgia, Florida. I mean, it's just a happening deal, and it makes it a lot easier to live among your peers and other friends there if you got the W that year. So a lot of
Gabriel played his tail off. Absolutely played his tail off.
He did, and defense caused 3 turnovers. Hey, they couldn't stop the ball. I mean, the guy hit 22 straight against them, but they made enough to stop that goal line stand was awesome. And I couldn't understand why Sark didn't try to score a touchdown at the end of the game instead of just setting up the field goal, because by doing that, you tell OU they're going to get the ball again. So you never know about it. But
big win, though. Big win. When
you keep hearing this stuff, Texas is back. They are back. They're back in the second in the league again.
What's interesting is, like, if you look at from the playoff standpoint for them, like if they run the table, they're going to likely get to play Oklahoma again. To avenge that loss kind of deal. Like it might be something where they say, "Hey, look, we beat Alabama and we also avenged our only loss. Put us in the playoff."
A really good article from Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports, part of the Rivals is part of Yahoo. He followed Greg Sankey all of Saturday, including at Oklahoma and Texas, and then went to Alabama and Texas A&M. So there's a lot of good anecdotes just from the future SEC fans of Texas and Oklahoma. So if people want to get a taste of what that day is like, Coach, you can kind of do it through the eyes of Greg Sankey, thanks to Ross Dellinger. So I encourage people to check that out. Also, check out Breda Pest Management, Connor Grading and Landscaping. Thanks for their support of Around the League. We'll see you all next week for mid-October here